So this week we start Chumash Vayikra. Chumash Vayikra is Toras HaKoyanim, and in this week's Parsha we start learning the various different halachas of many Korbanos. But because my tendency and my will usually is to be oisik in halachas that are noyag bizman hazeh, meheru yabona beis hamikdash, and it is important to talk about Mitzvahs HaMikdash as well. But the sugya we will be discussing today is Amiras Parshas HaKorbanos. So every siddur you take into your hand, between Berachos HaShachar and Hoidu and Pesukah de Zimra, we have Parshas HaKorbanos. How important is this, and where does it come from? So in Menachos Daf Kuf Yud, we find a Gemara that is everybody knows, everybody is familiar with. Kol ha'oisik b'Torah Zola ke'ilu hikrav oilo, kol ha'oisik b'Torah chatas ke'ilu hikrav chatas. But actually in Menachos Daf Kuf Yud, there are three different formulas of three different Ameroim: Reish Lakish, Rava, and Rabbi Yitzchak. And they all say something similar, but very different. Reish Lakish says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ke'ilu hikrav korban. Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ke'ilu hikrav korban. And l'chayra, the Pashtus Aloshan is mashma, whatever you learn, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ke'ilu hikrav korban. You could learn Bava Kama, Bava Metzia, Bava Basra, as long as you learn Torah, ke'ilu hikrav korban. Rava says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah einoi tzorech korban. So what is the difference between Reish Lakish and Rava? Reish Lakish says Kilu Hikrav Korban, and Rava says Einai Tzorech Korban. L'cha'ira, what is a greater level? If we say Kol ha'oisik b'Torah Kilu Hikrav Korban, the Mashmoah says Korban is derech hatchila. But if you learn Torah, it's good enough and is considered as if you brought a Korban. Rava says Torah is far greater than any Korban, and Kol ha'oisik b'Torah einoi tzorech korban. And Rabbi Yitzchak says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah tzorech kilu hikrav oilo, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah chatas kilu hikrav chatas. And Rabbi Yitzchak's formula is the better known one. So that is a Gemara in Menachos Kuf Yud. But in two other sources in Shas, there's a similar Gemara, similar but quite different, and that is Tanas Chav Zayin Amid Beis and Megillah Lamed Aleph Amid Beis. Avraham Avinu complained to HaKadosh Baruch Hu by Brisbane Abesorim, and he said, as long as the Beis HaMikdash is intact, my children will be okay. And if a person made an Aveira, he brings a Korban Chatos. If it's a Suffolk Aveira, he's going to bring a Osham. If he was over on Bittul Mitzvah to say, Korban Oiles Mechaper. But when the Beis HaMikdash will be destroyed, what's going to be with my children? How will they be zoichet to kapora? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu comforts Avraham Avinu, and he says, Kvar tikanti lehem seder korbanos. And in Yemei HaMoyadim, when they will read Parshas HaKorbanos, Mala ani aleihem va'ani mechaper avoinoiseihem. The Beis Yosef in Siman Aleph and Shulchan Aruch brings these two Gemaras as if they are the same. They definitely are similar, but there are very clear differences between the Gemara HaKadosh Baruch Hu talking to Avraham Avinu and the Gemara in Menachos. The Gemara in Menachos speaks about the individual, and all three Ameroim speak about the individual. Kol ha'oisik b'Torah Zola, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah. The Gemara in Tanas and Megillah is Kriyas HaTzibur. And Avraham Avinu was worried, La'achar Churban Beis HaMikdash, there will be no Korbanos, no Chatas, no Oshem. So how will Yiddish Kinderlich be zoichet to Kapora? And HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, Kriyas HaTorah b'yamei HaMoyados, when we read the Parsha of the Korbanos. So maybe Korban Yochid is what every individual says every day in the morning. He says Parshas HaKorbanos. Korbanos Tzibur is, they're also Mechaper. Korbanos Tzibur are Kriyas HaTorah b'yamei HaMoyed, when it is B'Tzibur. That would be one difference. The other is Kol ha'oisik. In Menachos, the Lashon of Chazal is Kol ha'oisik. In Tanis and Megillah, Kriya Satayra. There's a difference between Kriya and Eisek HaTorah. The Bach and Simon Mem Zayin, also quoted by the Taz, is mafarish the nusach habrocha birchas HaTorah lasoik b'divrei Torah. Lasoik means learning in depth. Lasoik means learning and understanding, not just Kriya. So in Tanis and the Megillah, Kodesh Baruch Hu tells Avraham Avinu, b'yamei hamoed, we have Kriya Satayra. Kriya Satayra is one thing. All the Amarom and Nochas Kufyud say, for the individual, it is Eisek HaTorah. And many Gedolah Adoros explain that the Zgul of Kol Oisik B'Torah, Ke'ilu Hikr Kol HaKorbanos Kulam, Kol Oisik B'Torah Soil Ke'ilu Hikr Koile, is really demands learning Be'iyun. The Mishnah Brura in Siman Mem Ches makes this very clear, and many others, starting off with Rabbeinu Bachya in Parshas Vayikra. When we read the Korbanos in the morning, we need to understand what we read. It's not just like a lachash keneged ayin hara. You just say words. You actually need to learn the Korbanos. You need to bear in mind what you're saying. So Avraham Avinu promised by HaKadosh Baruch Hu, by Kriyas HaTorah b'yamei hamoed, that would be considered as if they brought Korbanos. But for the individual, the Lashon HaGemara is Kol oisek b'Torah, Kol oisek b'Torahs haKorbanos. And Medrash Tanchume Parshas Tzav. There's an amazing Tanchume, and the Tanchume says, Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael. And it is essentially similar to Avraham Avinu, to his plea with HaKadosh Baruch Hu in Tanis and the Megillah, but it is to the individual, and not only Kriyas HaTorah but Tzibur. Omer HaKadosh Baruch Hu Yisrael, Bonai, Kisha'atem koirem lefonai beParshas HaTamid v'shoinem beParshas HaKorbanos, malani alechem kilu v'kravtem korban. Koirem beParshas HaTamid v'shoinem beParshas HaKorbanos. And there seems to be a difference between Parshas HaTamid and Parshas HaKorbanos. And it is clear that there is a difference. First of all, two different sources. Siman Aleph Siv Hey, and I'm reading the Shulchan Aruch Siman Aleph Siv Hey. Toy v'loy me Parshas Oakeda v'Parshas Haman v'Aseres Adibris u'Parshas Oile v'Mincho v'Shloma v'Chatas v'Osham. Toy v'loy mar. That is the Lashon of the Shulchan Aruch. It's a good thing to do. Definitely not a chiyuv. It's a good thing to do. Toiv loymar Parshas HaKorbanos. He doesn't speak about the Tamid Shel Shachar. Oila, Mincha, Shlomim, Chatos, Osham. Well, Oila could include the Tamid. But there's a different source for Parshas HaTamid, and that is in Siman Mem Ches. And in Siman Mem Ches, it is the Ramah in the beginning of the Siman. And the Ramah writes in Siman Mem Ches, V'oimrim Parshas HaTamid. V'oimrim Parshas HaTamid. And that is in Siman Mem Ches. Not Toiv Loimar, but actually V'oimrim Parshas HaTamid. Shulchan Aruch Harav, Siman Aleph, Shulchan Aruch Harav says, a Talmud Chochem shouldn't say Parshas HaKorbanos. He would be better off learning Torah. And that is the opinion of Shulchan Aruch Harav. So, Parshas HaKorbanos are important, but a person that would be sitting and learning, it would be better off learning than saying Parshas HaTamid. Siman Mem Ches, same Shulchan Aruch Harav writes, Kiblu Aleim Choivo to say Parshas HaTamid B'Kol Yom. So Parshas HaTamid, at least according to the Shulchan Aruch Harav, and it's also meduyik in the Lashonis of the Mechaber and the Ramah, the difference between Siman Aleph and Siman Mem Ches, Parshas HaTamid seems to be a higher level of chiyuv than other korbanos. And it is also notable, only in Parshas HaTamid we quote the psukim of Parshas HaTamid. All the other korbanos we learn Mishnayos, but we don't quote the psukim of the Torah. And that is a very obvious difference. And it fits in very well with the Medrash Tanchum Parshas Tzav that I quoted before. Shetiyu koirem lefonai beParshas HaTamid v'shoinim beParshas HaKorbanos. Shoinim means learning. Shono Mishnasoi, that is the Lashon of Mishna. So there are two differences between Parshas HaTamid and the other Korbanos. Parshas HaTamid is Kriya, and the other Korbanos are Yasoik b'Toras HaKorbanos. Other Korbanos, the Shulchan Aruch says, Toi v'lo imar. Shulchan Aruch Rav says, if you learn, better learn. But Parshas HaTamid, Shulchan Aruch Rav says, Kiblu aleihem chayva, so the chiyuv. So a person that doesn't have time to say Korbanos. And there are various different minhagim. Some Hasidim are mezalzel and tachnun. And there's this strange minhag when there's a yortzeit of a tzaddik, many Hasidim don't say tachnun. And today there are many svarim, and every day of the year you choose, you have a lot of tzaddikim, Litvish, Hasidish, Svardish, Ashkenazim, and there are many svarim that came out, about 20 yortzeits every day, so you never need to say tachnun. I say tachnun in my shul every day. Even in the yortzeit of my Rebbe, the Kloiser Magreb, we say tachnun. Chof Alafoda, the yortzeit of Rebbe Melech, when it says, we say tachnun. In my shul, we say tachnun every day. My father learned the Munkach, and the Munkach of the Mechzeloza is adamantly against this minig, and he says there has no source not to say tachnun on yortzeit. But I'm not here to give musar about saying tachnun. I just want to say, so Litvishe, are mezalzel in Chasidim, you don't say tachnun, what heter do you have not to say tachnun? And I would ask the Litvishe, what heter do you have not to say Korbanos? And no Litvishe shul do they say Korbanos. Tachnun and Korbanos are more or less on the same level. Not exactly the same, but nobody says everything. So those that say tachnun don't say that much Korbanos, and those that say Korbanos don't say that much tachnun, but a good Jew, I think, should say the entire Siddur from the beginning to the end, and you're definitely on the safe side. So anyway, Parshas HaTamid is a greater chiyuv than other Korbanos. Other Korbanos is Siman Aleph. Toiv lo yimar. Siman Mem Ches the Ramo says, Oimrim Parshas HaTamid. And Shulchan Aruch Rav clearly makes a difference between the two. And the differences are on two levels. Goydel HaChiyuv, how big the chiyuv is, and also the nature of the minig. Only in Parashat HaTamid we actually read the psukim, the parasha. All the other Korbanos we learn the Mishnayos, and that is like the Medrash Tanchuma says, "Koiren lefonai beParashas HaTamid v'shoinim beParashas HaKorbanos." Tov Kuf Nun Dalet is Hilchas Tisha B'Av, and the Shulchan Aruch says, Tisha B'Av, even though you can't learn Torah, but you could say Korbanos. And the Magen Avraham says, what the Shulchan Aruch means is only Parashas HaTamid, not all the others. Why not all the others? So many disagree with the Magen Avraham because Pashtas Aloshon Shulchan Aruch is, because it's Seder HaTfilah, you could say Korbanos. But according to the Magen Avraham, only Parashas HaTamid. And why is that? Either because Parashas HaTamid is a bigger chiyuv than other Korbanos, or because Parashas HaTamid is kriya. Other Korbanos are limud, and the Isser and Tisha B'Av is limud HaTorah, Pkudei Hashem Yishorim Mesam Chalev. So in two different ways we could understand the opinion of the Magen Avraham that Tisha B'Av, you could only say Tamid, not the other Korbanos. Either because Tamid is more of a chiyuv, and therefore it is more Seder HaTfilah, or because Tamid is merely Kriya. The other Korbanos we learn Mishnayos, and that is more limud, and therefore that is prohibited. But the biggest chiddush is in Shiboili Aleket Hilchas Tfilos Siman Hey. And the Shiboili Aleket says, Parashas HaTamid is a chiyuv, and that is why Korban Tamid is not mentioned in the Tefillah in the Shmoyne Esrei. Why are the Musafin and all the other Korbanos mentioned in the Shmoyne Esrei, Yom Tov and Shabbos, but Tefillah Musaf, and why in Tefillah Shachar we don't have Parashas HaTamid? So the Shabbat Leket says this proves because Parashat HaTamid is a chiyuv, and you say it in the morning before davening, and therefore you don't need to say it in Tefillah in Shemoneh Esrei. What comes out from this Shabbat Leket, and the Shabbat Leket was one of the Rishonim, is far beyond the Shulchan Aruch Harav that says Kiblu Aleihem Choiva. Is this a Choive Gemura Tikkun Chazal? And that would be a Gevaldige Chiddush. Because if he says that is the reason Parashat HaTamid is not in Tefillas Hamid and not in the Shemoneh Esrei, then that would necessitate that it's a Chiyuv Gomer Midrabanon. Because Anshe Knesset Agdola were metaken the Nusach of Shemoneh Esrei, and that is a Chiddush we find nowhere, that it is a Chiyuv Gomer in Seder HaTefillah to say Parashat HaTamid. It's also a shtickle tema b'yenai, because if Tamid is a chiyuv, it should be in the Shemoneh Esrei, and not in before Psuke de Zimra, Mehechetesa. I think there's a far more reasonable explanation why we don't mention Parashat HaTamid in Shemoneh Esrei. Why should we? Shachris is rachamei. Shachris is primarily about Bekoshes Tzrachim. And those are the brachas emtsoyos. And Chazal clearly in Masechet Brachos explain the structure of the three tefillas, Shachris Mincha Maariv. Gimel Rishon is Shavuchei Shel Mokoim, brachas emtsoyos bakoshes tzrochim, Gimel Achroin is Hoidoya. Korbanos don't fit in there. Tefillas HaMusaf is entirely about the Korban. And that is why we only say Musaf in a day where there's a Korban Musaf. And because Tefillas HaMusaf is all about Korbanos, we say Korban Musaf. Tefillas Shachris is not about Korbanos. Korbanos don't fit into Tefillas HaShachar. And that would be the Pashasdik explanation, because the Shabbat Leket is a Gevaldige Chiddush. One more important source that sets apart Tamid from all the other Korbanos is the Rambam. Sof Sefer Ahava, the Rambam writes the entire Seder HaTefillah, all the Tefillas, Chol, Shabbos, Yom Tov. Nusach HaTefillah, Metchila Vatsof is in Rambam, and the Rambam writes, every day in the morning we say Parshas Tzav, not Parshas Vayikra, Parshas Tzav. Parshas Tzav is Tamid. All the other Korbanos are on Parshas Vayikra, not on Parshas Tzav. And the Rambam writes, B'tchilas HaTefillah, every day in the morning, we say Parshas Tzav. So, all these sources are about Amidas HaKorbanos. It is an important minig. Toiv v'loimar. Shulchan Aruch Harav says, a Talmud Chacham doesn't need to say Korbanos, and that is a Chiddush. Most of the other poskim say everybody should say Parshas HaKorbanos, and it says Gula Ke'ilu Hikriv Korban, and obviously that is quite an important segula. So the Shulchan Aruch Harav and Simon Memches says that Talmud Chacham doesn't need to say Korbanos, and the source of the Shulchan Aruch Harav is the Divrei Chamudos in Masechet Brachos. Who was the Divrei Chamudos? The Tosfos Yom Tov, who was more than 100 years before the Shulchan Aruch Harav. Tosfos Yom Tov was the Talmud of the Maharal Prague. His most famous sefer is the Tosfos Yom Tov al Mishnayos, but he also wrote Divrei Chamudos on the Rosh. And he is the first one that says a Talmud Chacham doesn't need to say Parshas HaKorbanos. The Chavos in Mekor Chaim disagrees. And the Chavos says, and it is so typical of the Chavos Chavos was almost in the days of the Tosfos Yom Tov, and his sefer Mekor Chaim and Shulchan Aruch Chaim. It is a privilege of our generation to have the Mekor Chaim. The Chavos lived more than 300 years ago, and he wrote a sefer Mekor Chaim. And then he apologizes and he says, After I finished my Sefer, the Magen Avraham was published. And after the Magen Avraham came out, I need to revise my entire Sefer. Because most of the things I wrote are already in the Magen Avraham. Sometimes I disagree with them, but I need to redo my Sefer entirely. And that is why, even though I prepare it to print, I can't do it. And we were not Zoicha to the Makor Chaim for 300 years. It was an Ksav Yad, and only our generation, Machon Yerushalayim, printed the Makor Chaim from Ksav Yad. And there's quite a lot to learn there beyond the Magen Avraham. So, in our Sukkah, the Makor Chaim disagrees with the Divrei Chamudos, and he writes, let us not pretend that we are such Gevaldige Masmidim. Yeah, Reb Shimon bar Yochai v'Chaverav didn't need to say Parshas Korbanos. Teirosam umenosam v'loy posek pimei umegirse. But we have time for Sicha B'Teila, we have time for Divurim B'Teilim, so you're not such a great Talmid Chacham that you could afford not to say Korbanos. That is what the Makor Chaim writes, disagreeing with those that say that a Talmid Chacham doesn't need to say. But what is essentially the argument of the Tosis Yom Tov and the Shulchan Aruch Harav? Brings us back to the sugya which we started this year today. Rish Luka says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ki'ilu hikrev korban. Rava says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah eino tzorech korban. So if we say, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ki'ilu hikrev korban, that means korban is definitely preferable. But if you learn Torah, it is as if. There's an important shuv in Shvus Yankov. What does it mean, ke'ilu? Hamal ben pnei chaveroi berabim, ke'ilu. Ke'ilu, it is like shvichas domim. When a person talks Loshen Hara, it is ke'ilu over al gimel averes chamuris shebetorah. Ke'ilu is lav dafka. Everybody understands. You embarrass the person. It's a terrible thing to do. You need to apologize. But it's not like murder. And when you spoke Lashon Hara, it is not like avodah zora gili arayis shvichas damim. That is ke'ilu. And if ke'ilu in the negative context, when we're talking about averis, is not mamish ke'ilu, the same would go in the positive context. When we say Kol ha'oisik b'Torah soile ki'ilu hikrev oila, it is not mamish ki'ilu hikrev oila. But Rava says Kol ha'oisik b'Torah eino tzorech kol korban. And that means Torah is more important than korbanos. So the argument of the Divrei Chamudos of the Shulchan Aruch depends on, is it Rish Lakish Rav Yitzchak or is it Rava? Rish Lakish says Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ki'ilu hikrev korbanos. Rabbi Yitzchak says Kol ha'oisik b'Torah is oila ki'ilu hikrev oila. Rava says eino tzorech korbanos. So according to Rava, Talmud Torah comes before Korbanos. If you learn Torah, you don't need to say Korbanos. According to the two others, it definitely is preferable to say Korbanos, because learning Torah is only ki'ilu. When Rava says, Rish Lakish says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ki'ilu hikrev kol korbanos, Shulchan Aruch Harav for some reason understood, not the Shulchan Aruch Harav, the Chofetz Chaim. The Chofetz Chaim, in a few different sources, Chofetz Chaim understood that when Rish Lakish says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ki'ilu hikrev korbanos, he means Torah sa korbanos. But Rashi on the spot is mafarish different. Rashi says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah ki'ilu hikrev kol korbanos, like I said at the beginning of the Shiur. Learn Torah, whatever you learn. It is only Rabbi Yitzchak that says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah is oila ki'ilu hikrev oila. Torah is chatas ki'ilu hikrev chatas. Oisik b'Torah is osham ki'ilu hikrev osham. And our minig to say in the morning the Mishnah is based on Rabbi Yitzchak. However, halacha is always kerava when Rava has machlokes with other ameroim. Hilchas kibesroa is Rava. So out of the three, halacha kerava. And Rava says, Kol ha'oisik b'Torah eino tzorech korbanos. And that is the argument, which seems to be a powerful argument, of the Divrei Chamudos and the Shulchan Aruch Harav. If you learn Torah, you don't need Korbanos. You shouldn't say Korbanos. You would be better off learning Torah. And even the Makor Chaim doesn't disagree because Korbanos is more important than Torah, but the Makor Chaim says, it is Yohara. Don't pretend you don't have time to say Korbanos. You could find 5 minutes to say the Korbanos as well, even though you're a big lamdin. You have time for a lot of other things throughout the day, make time to say Korbanos. But fundamentally it depends on the three opinions. So the Chofetz Chaim understood Resh Lakish, Kol ha'oiseh b'Torah ki lo yikrev Korbanos, Torah is a Korbanos. Rashi, Rabbeinu Gershom, on the spot, the Menachos Kuf Yud, seem to be very clear. It is only Rabbi Yitzchak says, if you're oisig b'Torah, it's oile ki lo yikrev oilam. What Resh Lakish says is, whatever you learn, learning Torah is mechaper, learning Torah is metayar, learning Torah is as if you're makrav korbanos. Rashi, Rabbeinu Gershom, the Marsha on the spot, and the Maharit. The Maharit has a sefer, Drush Tzafnas Paneach ala Torah, and in Tzafnas Paneach, I don't remember whether it's Parshas Vayikra or Parshas Tzav. His understanding in Resh Lakish is the same. Learning Torah is as good as Korbanos, whatever you learn. So when we say Kol ha'oiseh b'Torah oile ki'ilu hikrev oila, I mentioned a few minutes ago, usually ki'ilu is not mamish, like in the negative sense. Ki'ilu shofach damim, noyach la'odam shiyapal es atzmoi, lekivshen o'esh va'al yalbam pnei chaveiro, because it's ki gimel aveirus chamuris shebetoira. So what is the din? Person was over on a lav, and he learned Parshas Chatos. V'nivne beis hamikdash b'yamav. Does he need to bring a korban chatos? Or we would say no. It is already ke'ilu hikrev korban. Chikrei Leiv, one of the great Sephardi Gedolim, Orach Chaim, Simen Bey says, Milsa the Pshita, that it doesn't pater him from a korban chatos. This halacha was said when we don't have the ability to bring a korban. We don't have a Beis HaMikdash. So learn Parshas Chatos, Parshas Oile, it is as if you brought a korban, but it doesn't pater you from bringing a korban. And the Chikrei Leiv explains in two different ways why not. If Chazal say Ke'ilu Hikrev Korban, then why does he still need to bring a korban? You don't need to bring two korbanos. Number one, he says, Ke'ilu is not mamish Ke'ilu. Number two, Ke'ilu Hikrev Korban is Beinodam L'Makom. But every korban is matnas kahuna. And the koyanim eat besara chatos va'osham. So you need to bring a korban for chelik ha-koyanim. Beinodam L'Makom, between you and HaKadosh Baruch Hu, it's good enough. You learn Parshas Oile, Parshas Chatos. But what about the chelik ha-koyanim? When you bring a korban, it's also matnas kahuna. The nafka between the two explanations is korban moila. Korban moila is kulei kolel. There is no chelek lekoyanim in korban moila. So according to the first mahalach, then korban chatos, korban moila, no difference. It's not mamish keilu. But according to the second mahalach, there is no bosa, but the oiris of oila go to shevet kahuna, and therefore there still is a chelek koyanim. But lefi pshutam shel devorim, keilu is not mamish keilu, and it's a miltzah the pshita that learning Torah, when you cannot bring a korban, is what you could do. Keilu hikrev chatos, keilu hikrev oila, but it doesn't pater you from actually bringing a korban. ובזמן שבייס המקדוש היו קיים, if you need to bring a chatas, you bring a chatas. De'ein ha-korbanos kavim ela b'yoyim. And that is why you can say balayla. However, the lashon of the Tur is toiv yoisar loimer b'yoyim. Toiv yoisar. So the Tur doesn't exclude entirely. And that is why the Mishnah writes, Ve'im ein lo pnai. If you had a very busy day and you couldn't say Parshas HaKorbanos b'yoyim, or you get up very early in the morning and you daven early, Yoitzer derech, you daven achar lois shachar. You could say Parshas HaKorbanos even b'layla lo lois shachar. Im ein lo pnai, yochal loimer gam Parshas HaKorbanos b'layla. So the din of the Shulchan Aruch is ki'ilu hikra korban, and therefore it needs to be in proper way b'yoyim. You can't bring a korban b'layla. But the Mishnah Berurah, based on the Torah, says it's only elachatchila. But even b'layla, if you can't say b'yoyim, you could say b'layla. So it's not mamish ki'ilu hikra korban. And then the other question would be, the Magen Avraham says you need to say Parshas HaKorbanos ba'amida, because a kohen can sit while doing the avodah. All avodas HaKorbanos need to be performed ba'amida. So the Magen Avraham says the same reasoning that you can't say Parshas HaKorbanos ba'layla, you can't say Parshas HaKorbanos ba'yeshiva, elo ba'amida. Most of the Achronim disagree, and they write, Ma'olam lo shamanu. People don't necessarily stand when saying Parshas HaKorbanos. It is not the minig olam. And we never saw a kpeda. Rabbi Yankov and Moiruk Tzio, the Chido, the Elio Rabba disagree with the Magen Avraham. The Kaf HaChaim in Sif Kot Lamed Gimel says that al pi Kabbalah it is preferable to say b'yeshiva. Comes along the Aruch HaShulchan, Siman Aleph Sif Chavav, and the Aruch HaShulchan is always original, and he says it depends. A kohen should only say Parshas HaKorbanos b'amida, but a yisrael could say b'yeshiva. What is the logic of the Aruch HaShulchan? Ke'ilu hikriv could be interpreted in two different ways. It is, do you imagine you're the kohen doing the avodas? Or maybe you're the yisrael bringing a korban and giving over your korban to the kohenim, and they do the avodah. So the Aruch HaShulchan understands, if you're a kohen, then to you ke'ilu hikriv is, you actually were makar the korban, you did the avodas. But if you're a yisrael, so nobody says that the entire inyan of saying Parshas HaKorbanos was only given to Kohanim. Nobody says that. If we say, you need to say B'yoyim v'loy b'laylo, because you can't bring a korban b'laylo, you need to say it B'amida v'lo b'yeshiva, because you can't bring a korban when you're sitting, so why wouldn't you say, Azar is possible to bring a korban? Azar paisel avoida, you can't come into the Azor, he can't bring a korban, Azar. So why would Azar say Parshas HaKorbanos? So Ke'ilu Hikriv Korban could be explained in two different ways. Not necessarily it is as if you are Shoichet and Mekabel and Moilech and Zoyre Gedomim, but if you're Chayiv Chatos, you bring a Chatos and you give over the Chatos to the Kohenim. They do the Avodah. So the Aruch HaShulchan has an interesting approach, and he says, if you're a kohen, you need to say b'amida, because for a kohen it is ki'ilu hikriv mamish. If you're yisrael, you could say b'yeshiva. However, it needs to be b'yoyim, because avodas HaKorbanos is only b'yoyim v'loy b'laylo. And that is why the din of amida is only the Magen Avraham, and most of the kohenim disagree. The din b'yoyim goes all the way back to the Rosh and the Tur and the Shulchan Aruch, so they are not the same. The Beis Yosef is Siman Tov Reish Chof Aleph. Tov Reish Chof Aleph is Hilchos Yom Kippurim. And the Beis Yosef says, Ato koinanto, and that is avoidas kohen gadol b'yom Kippurim. There is Nusach Ashkenaz and Nusach Sfarad. And the Beis Yosef says, in Nusach Sfarad, there are some things that are not alibe de hilchasa, that are not in accordance to halacha and avodas Yom Kippurim, but we don't need to change the nusach. Ve'ein bekach kpeida. If we say ke'ilu hikrev korban, and probably the same would go to avodas kohen gadol b'yom Kippurim, which was so important, and it was the kapor of Klal Yisrael. So how could we say something that is not a libe de hilchasa? If it's considered ke'ilu hikrev korban, we're makav a korban shaloi ka'halacha. How could that be? So l'chayra, it is clear in the Beis Yosef that it is not mamish ke'ilu hikrev. Maybe the din of ke'ilu hikrev korban is only by Korbanos yochid, and brings us all the way back to the beginning of the Shiur. Korbanos yochid, that is the Gemara Menachos. Korbanos tzibur is the Gemara in Tanis and Megillah. Korbanos tzibur is Kriyas HaTorah b'Parshas HaMoyadim. When we read Parshas HaMesofim, which were Korbanos tzibur. So avodas kohen gadol b'yom Kippurim is a korban tzibur. And by korban tzibur, there is no din of ke'ilu hikrev. That is more for Klal Yisrael, not as the individual. And maybe that is why there is no kpeida in kriyas avodas kohen gadol b'yom Kippurim. And the Beis Yosef says, even though there are details which are not always gotten the halacha, ein bekach kpeida. And this brings us to the last question in today's Shiur. But maybe even before the last question, is kol hakoira, does it pater a person from Korbanos? I quoted before the Chikrei Leiv. And one of the beautiful rayas, Rabbi Shmuel, Shabbos Daf Yud Beis, lo yikra lo oraner, shemu yata. Rabbi Shmuel says, Ani korosi vehitesi. And Rabbi Shmuel, Rosham al pinkosoi, kishiabona beis hamikdash o vichatos shemeino. Why didn't he simply learn Parshas Chatos? Why did he need wait till Yabona beis hamikdash? And more than 2,000 years transpired since the days of Rabbi Shmuel, and Adayin lo zochinu. Why didn't he simply read Parshas Chatos? This proves that Kriyas HaParsha doesn't pater you from a korban. I'm sure he did read Parshas Chatos. Probably did it every day, according to the Shulchan Aruch. But it doesn't pater from a korban. Tshuvas Marsham Chelik Beis, there's Akdama from the son of the Marsham. I don't even remember, was it his son or his son-in-law? Maybe his son-in-law. I don't think his son wrote any Hagdamas. And he has a nice diuk. And he says, Kol ha'oiseh b'toras chatos kilu hikrev chatos. But it is not kilu hikrev chatos shemeino. And that is why Reb Shimon Rosham al pinkasoi kishiabona beis hamikdash ovi chatos shemeino. So when you actually bring Korbanos, there is a hidur to bring a big animal, a beautiful animal. There is more eimerem al gabe mizbeach. There's more bosor la'achilas hakoyanim. So even though it is kila hikrev chatos, but Rosham al pinkosoi yishabona beis hamikdash ovi chatos shmeino. So this concept, kol ha'oiseg b'toras hakabonos kilu hikrev korban, is it unique to Korbanos, or does it also go to every mitzvah she'ein biyodenu lekayim bizman hazeh? Kol echad miyasu al har hamitzvah v'aliyah l'regel. And there are so many mitzvahs that we can't be makayim bizman hazeh. And there are so many mitzvahs that not every individual could be makayim. No individual could be Makayim all the Taryag mitzvahs. Some mitzvahs are mitzvahs HaKoyanim, other are mitzvahs HaLeviyim. A Kohen can be Makayim a mitzvah of a Levi. A Levi can be Makayim the mitzvahs of a Kohen. A Yesod is exempt from both mitzvahs HaLeviyim and mitzvahs HaKoyanim. Mitzvahs that are not noyeg lachashachor or lachashachor in Beis HaMikdash. And so many mitzvahs that only individuals could be Makayim. There are mitzvahs that are upon Melech Yisrael. Other mitzvahs that are mitzvahs on the Beis Din, not on the individual. So is this halacha kolo oise keilu kiyem only for Korbanos, or does it go for all the mitzvahs? Uneshalmu porim sfosenu. So in Shabbos Daf Lamed Aleph, a ger asked Hillel, Gereini, al manashe kayem kol haTorah kulo al regel achas, and Hillel says, Ma de lachsana lachav lechosavet ve'idach perusha zil gemor. So the Sifrei Drush say, this ger wanted a formula, an eitzah, I want to be Mekayim all the Taryag mitzvahs. Is it possible? And the Hillel gives them two eitzahs. Ahavas Yisrael. And of Kol Yisrael Baguda Achas, every mitzvah that one does, he does for the poor. And the other is Zil Gemor, Telech L'Lmod. Kol ha'osek b'Torah sira l'dachas kilu kiyam l'dachas. Kol ha'osek b'Torah s'karbonis kilu karbonis. When you learn din aliyah l'regel kilu or l'regel. When you learn all the dinim, if you can be Makayim, learn the Torah. Three great Gedolim actually say every person needs to be Makayim all the Taryag mitzvahs shebet-Torah. Because the Reish Mem Ches mitzvahs say are keneged Eiver ha'odam, and every Eiver is yonik chiyas from a mitzvah. So you need all the mitzvahs. And those mitzvahs that you can be Makayim b'foyal, you learn the Torah. And that is based on an assumption that each and every one of Taryag mitzvahs has chelek, machshava, dibur, v'maisa. And if you can be Makayim the mitzvah l'maisa, you still have machshava and dibur. You learn the Torah. The Mabit, the great Mabit, who was the father of the Maharit, writes it twice in his forum. Beis Elokim Tshuva. Beis Elokim is the Musa Sefer of the Mabit. And in the introduction to Kiryas Sefer, that's the Perish of the Mabit and the Rambam. The Taz, Tur Zohar as a Sefer Divrei Dovid, Drushem ala Torah, in Parshas Vayishlach. When Yaakov Avinu says, Taryag mitzvah shemarti, and the Taz says, it was before Matan Torah, and even after Matan Torah. How could a person be Mekayim Taryag mitzvahs? The Taz says, Kol ha'osek. If you learn Kol ha'Torah Kila, it is as if you were Mekayim all the mitzvahs. And number 3 is the Shlo HaKodesh. And the Shlo says, Ki korav alecho adova ma'oid, befichu u'belvavcho la'asoisoi. Loi b'shamayim v'loi me'ever le'yam. And the pshat of the Shlo is, some mitzvahs are b'shamayim, some mitzvahs are me'ever le'yam. Nobody could be Makayim all the mitzvahs. The Torah says you could. Befichu u'belvavcho. Learn Torah, and it is as if. And all these Gedolim quote the Gemara Menachos Kuf Yud. Keilu hikrev Korbanos. But after all, we do not find this in Chazal, only by Korbanos. Lulei divrei hagedolim hanal, I would say, it is only Racha Mishamayim, it is only by Korbanos. Because the Korbanos is not merely a mitzvah. Korbanos is kapora. So Kodesh Baruch Hu promised Avraham Avinu, le'achar Chorban Bayis, what's going to be. So one eitzah is Kriyas Torah, and the other is Talmud Torah. In Chazal, we do not find this concept only by Korbanos. But these 3 Gedolim, Merachmim, Midas Arachmim said, we decree and we decide, goes for all the mitzvahs. So I think the easiest way to be Makayim, this eitzah of Kolo Oisek Keilu Kiyem, is going through the Mishnah Torah of the Rambam. If you don't want to learn the entire Shas, then if you go once in your life, you went through the Mishnah Torah, the Rambam is the only sefer that covers the entire spectrum, all the Taryag mitzvahs shebet Torah. I'm not a big chassid of limud Rambam. I mean, every Rambam learns Rambam, but not Lefia Seder. If you want to learn something Lefia Seder, you got to learn the Shulchan Aruch, learn the Mishnah Berurah, which is Halacha L'Maisa. The Rambam is not really Halacha L'Maisa, but it's a Gevaldik Gula in the context of Kol or Aloimed Kol Oisek Keilu Kiyem. So the best eights and the best formula is at least once during your lifetime. If you go through the entire Mishnah Torah, you covered all the Taryag mitzvahs shebet Torah. L'chayra there's a raya against those poskim and pshutoi shel dvorim. Only by Korbanos we find this eights of this formula, and that is Bo Metzia Kuf Yudalid. There's a story, an encounter between one of the great Amirom, Rabbi Baravu and Eliyahu Novi. Rabbi Baravu finds Eliyahu Novi in a basic Kvoris, and he asks questions, and Eliyahu Novi gives him Piskei Halacha, Mesadrin Lebal Choiv, and various other sugyas. Then Rabbi Baravu asks Eliyahu Novi, just a minute, aren't you a Kohen? And what are you doing in a basic Kvoris? You're a Kohen. And Eliyahu Novi asks him, I wonder, it is said that you're a great Talmud Chacham, you're an Amoira, and you're not booking and say the Taharis? You don't know that Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai says, Kivrei oivdei kechovim einam min tamim ba'oil. This is a Goyish cemetery. And Kivrei akum einam min tamim ba'oil. I wonder, you're not booking in Taharis? And Rabbi Baravu apologizes and he says, because I'm booking in 4 Zdorim, I'm definitely not booking in all 6 Zdorim. Rashi explains which 4 Zdorim was he booking. Goes without saying. Moyed Noshem Nezikin, you need to be booking because these halachos are noyeg bezman hazeh. Zram is only noyeg in Eretz Yisrael, and that didn't happen in Eretz Yisrael, it happened in Bavel. So which are the 4 Zdorim? Rashi explains, Moyed Noshem Nezikin and Kodshim. Why Kodshim? Because Kodshim is important. If this same concept goes for all the mitzvahs, then Zroim and Taharis would be just as important as Kodshim. So why did they learn Kodshim? Rashi writes, even though Kodshim is not Noyeg Bismah. So what is the difference between Zroim, Taharis, and Kodshim? Rashi writes, but they need to learn Kodshim because first of all, what we learn from Rashi is Kolo Oisek means Kolo Oisek. You need to know what you're saying. You need to know the halachas. It's not like a lachash. But if this klal goes for all the mitzvahs, yesh li Hashem, because after all, the Taz, the Mabit, the Shlo, were gedolim shebe gedolim. Did they forget a Rashi and Bo Metzia Kuf Yudalid? There still is a difference between Kodshim and Taharis and Zroim. Zroim and Taharis are not mitzvahs chiyuviyos. They are mitzvahs kiyumiyos. If you want to eat Parashat, that's all you have the mitzvah. If you are nitma, these are the halachas. But Kodshim are chiyuvim. There are Korbanos that one needs to bring. And everybody, sometimes, from time to time, needs to bring a chatas, needs to be a noshom. Be a me'aregel, you need to bring Korbanos. So, Kodshim stands apart. And it is not a pircha on divrei hagadoylem hanal. So today, we learned about the mitzvah of Parashat HaKorbanos and the Zgula of Amiras Parashat HaKorbanos. Thursday is the Chodesh Nisan. Shabbos Kodesh over Reinu L'Toiva, we also already said Berchas HaChodesh, Chodesh Nisan. And this halacha is primarily Pesach. So Korban Pesach is unique and it stands apart of all the other Korbanos. It is the only Korban Yochid, which is a chiyuv upon kol echod ve'echod mi-Yisrael. It is the only mitzvah say together with Milah, which is a chiyuv koros. So fundamentally, there are two different types of Korbanos, Korban Sibur and Korban Yochid. Korban Sibur are Tamidin, Umesofim, Tomet Shachar, Tomet Shorbeinu Abayim, Korbanos HaMusaf, and then we have Korban Yochid. Pesach is some kind of a combination. On one hand, it definitely is a Korban Yochid, and it is upon Kol Echod ve'echod mi-Yisrael. On the other hand, Einoi bo ela b'chaburo. And even b'di'evet, there's a machlekes whether you could bring a Korban Pesach b'yochid. It is a Korban Yochid, but it needs to come b'chabura. It's a Korban Yochid, but it is upon each and every Yid in the entire world. So Pesach turns the Yochid into a chelik of the community. It is a Korban Yochid, but unlike every other Korban Yochid, you can't do it alone. You can't do it by yourself. It needs to come b'chabura. And you need to eat the Pesach b'chabura. And you can't go from one chabura to the other chabura. So that is unique about Korban Pesach. Pesach Mitzrayim had a different halacha. V'shchenoi akorev el beisoi. So Pesach Doires, you could choose your chabura. So the younger Leiten Koilel would want to be together with the Rosh Koilel in his chabura. They could talk and learning, B'leila Seder. And the simpletons won't feel so comfortable being with a big Talmud Chochem. They will choose their kin and their friends. And usually families would come together. In Pesach Mitzrayim, the Torah says, you cannot choose your chabura. You're going to sit together with your neighbors. But my neighbors are Poshet Yidden, and I'm a Rebbe. I'm a big Rav. I want to invite my Talmidim. Pesach Mitzrayim, no. You're not going to invite anyone. You're going to sit with your neighbors. So after hundreds of years of Golas Mitzrayim, and the Gemara says in Brochus, Yisrael sheba oisei dor hayom menakram be'ashpo ketan hagoyim ad shebo Moshe Rabbeinu v'stiglam seder suda. There was a need to teach Klal Yisrael Midas Toivus. Pesach Mitzrayim, you're going to sit with your neighbors. And you cannot choose whom you're going to spend the Leila Seder with. And that is also something that is unique about Korban Pesach, and that was Pesach Mitzrayim. But even Pesach Doiris is bo bechavuro. So this Korban is different than all the other Korbanos. On one hand, it's a Korban Yochid, it's not a Korban Sibur. And every Yid needs to be monui al Korban Pesach, einoi bo ela bechabora, which teaches us the importance of family, the importance of community, and avodas Hashem together. It's not only about you. So Korban Pesach is the most important of all Korbanos Yochid. And it is the only Korban which is a chiyuv koros. And it is the only Korban Yochid sheba bechavura. And that is a yesod in Korban Pesach. So B'leila said that it's a minig Yisrael. Families come together. People look for guests. We don't want to spend the Seder alone. And so many people that are engaged in Kiruv, Leila Seder is one of the most important and powerful tools in our disposal. Inviting people to Leila Seder and have them experience the magnificent night of Leila Seder, She'ein Kemoisei, Leil Shemurim Yurachem, Shemurim and Amazikim, and this night is so important. And Chassidish Sforim say Why is it called the Seder? Because that is the Seder of all year. And your year will look like your Seder. And I always encourage people, B'Leila Seder, don't look like a fool, and your kinderlach and einikel will sit around the table, and you're going to open one agod after the other, looking for a word to say, and you're going to ask your kids, what did he say last year? I forgot what he said last year. This night is important enough to prepare. Take your time. Rosh Chodesh Nisan, take out your favorite Haggadah or your favorite Haggadahs, make some notes, decide what is the message you want to convey to your family, to your guests. This night is too important to arrive unprepared. So this is important enough to take your time and to plan. What do you want to say, B'Leila Seder, and what is the message you want to convey? A message of chizuk, of emunah, of betochen, and especially in such special times as we are now, in times of war, and we once again are seeing miracles and siyata d'shmaya with all the pain, and there is pain, and our lives are disrupted, but relatively, miraculously, Baruch Hashem, HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shomer Amo Yisrael Ad, and we should continue to see Nisim, and we should also see Nisim Gluyim. Ki ameitzeschem me'eretz Mitzrayim, arenu neflois. We should see Nisim in Bias Goel Tzedek, in Binyan Beis Hamikdash, b'mheiro v'yomeinu, amen.